Hi, everyone. I'm Gary Summers, and welcome to the audio edition of Mind, Body, Soul, a show about your mental, physical, and spiritual wellness. Well, the explosion of yoga over the last number of years has been incredible. And I have another yoga teacher with me online today to talk about how yoga has helped her and to talk about her online classes and how you can actually benefit actually by not even having to leave your home. So hello, Nicole Blackwood.
Hello, welcome. Thanks for
Yeah.
having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. So, Nicole, just give our listeners some idea as to what they can expect to hear from you today.
I own or I'm the founder of Embody Yoga and Wellness. We're located physically in the west end of St. John's, but since the pandemic, we have moved also online. So we are hardwired in there now to continue with our hybrid online and in-studio classes for the foreseeable future. So it's been working. It's really was like a lifeline for us to stay open during the pandemic because of the distancing requirements. And our population of students are, many of them are older adults or have family members who are higher risk. So it's imperative for us to keep them safe as possible. And then, so even now we're still, easing back pretty gently into, we're still doing physical distancing and all that stuff. So it's really important for us. So my passion for even starting a studio was about offering classes for everybody or all bodies, all life stages, all ages.
What's your
And
who's your youngest participant? Who's your oldest participant?
so we don't ask people's ages, but we do have students in their 80s.
Okay.
And the youngest one, so we don't do kids yoga. It's an adult focused
Okay.
studio as of
Sure.
now. That's what we focus on. But our youngest participants would probably be my prenatal and postnatal students. So they're, as young mid to late 20s.
Okay.
But most of those students of that age are there for prenatal, postnatal, and then they come to me to some classes after. But I would say are like more the average age is like 35, 40 plus, and a lot of people like in their later stages of about to retire or just retired, that type of life stage. So yeah, so it's that's what I'm hoping to spread the word of, is how yoga is not just what we see in commercials and what is put out there in the popular culture of yoga. And you even started this interview with like saying how like it's blown up, like it's a big thing,
It
right?
is, yeah.
And with that comes, once the commercial world gets their fingers in a practice that they can make money off of, then it starts to get very commercial.
Yeah.
And then we can start to be very exclusive, which is the opposite of what we want for a practice that is meant to help you realize your true potential as a human being.
How did you get in? How did you get into yoga?
So I started doing yoga when about my final year or so of university, but really once I started working full time and I moved out west to Calgary. I worked a very like higher demanding job that I never really felt fulfilled with. So even when I wasn't at a time of a lot of work on my plate, I just never had that fulfillment. So I originally went to yoga, like many people, from a physical aspect. And I am naturally more of a hypermobile person. So the practice came easy to me, at least from the outside. If someone was
Okay.
looking at me, they would be like, "Oh, she can do
Yeah.
yoga," and I'm doing air quotes
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
do yoga, right? So
Yeah.
the one limb of yoga that looks good from the outside.
Yeah.
So and I was never a very physical person. I was always more of a bookworm who not really athletic, but
Yeah.
I really found my home in that type of movement modality. And it quickly just trickled into the other aspects of my life and how, managing stress um, and able to, I knew I was different after I did a class, and I felt empowered and I felt strong.
And those are, and I always say to people, it doesn't matter what you do. The whole point is to feel better while you're doing it and to feel better after you do it.
Exactly.
Well, you talked about accessible, inclusive, and sustainable. Do you want to talk about those terms?
Yeah. So those are the pillars that are upholding our studio and what I'm trying to build, the foundation of what I'm trying to build the studio from. As I mentioned, I'm someone who is more hypermobile. I can do the shapes of yoga that can seem attractive. You can get a nice picture,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So, but this whole, like, the yoga industry portrays that is yoga, and if you are if you're mobile and you are like longer limbed and can get into these shapes, this is what yoga is, and this is what it is portrayed as. When people see that, they're like, well, I can't do yoga. Like,
right.
I'm 60 years old and
Yeah,
can't touch my toes, and I can hardly like walk up a flight of stairs. So it's just like, they are like, that's just for the young and limber,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And I just had some experiences in my own practice as I started practicing more, and I did my teacher training, and I started my practice started to pick up a bit. I actually ended up hurting myself, and because I do have a spine condition that I have to be extra mindful of.
Mm.
And then just how I had to change how I practice made me even realize more that, just because me, who from the outside seems like someone who can do all the things, may not necessarily should be doing all the things. And what is the purpose of doing all these big poses, right?
Right.
What is the ultimate purpose? So
Right.
I started questioning a lot of stuff, and it changed how I approached my yoga. And then I started to get into, the softer realms of yoga. And so I started to realize that, this, and then when I wanted to teach, I really had this strong passion to like teach to my mom, to teach to my to people who,
Yeah.
I felt needed yoga. And that's someone who is, and it's great. I love that 20-year-olds are doing yoga, but most of them, don't have the life experience to
Right. True.
have that body that needs that support,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And they still need it, of course, but this is where my heart was at. So as the studio now, we celebrate, will be almost 6 years now in May, and it's just evolved into making classes accessible. So when I say accessible, it's a class, it's offering a range of classes, so a student could find a class no matter their physical ability. So we have a range of classes at the studio. So we have chair yoga and all the way up to more active classes. So and then we also, that's like from a physical spectrum, but we also have classes that are quieter in terms of a softer approach, so that you could have quiet the mind a little bit better, soothe the nervous system. And that element of yoga that's the purpose.
Sure.
To get to that place.
Absolutely.
Right? So accessibility through the styles of yoga we offer, and then within the class, our teachers, like, I love my teachers at the studio. They're like a family to me. They are very inclusive, and they're very accepting and warm of everybody, right? And a true accessible yoga class is being able to work within the realm of that class to offer options through yoga props, through different postures, and even language we use is important. Like, you'll hear people say, oh, well, you can modify that pose. That's not what do you mean modify? So that means what I'm doing isn't as good as this person. So why is it modify?
Yeah.
So even the language we use is important. It's like, here's when we introduce a pose, these are 3 ways of doing this pose. I'm going to show you the 3 ways. These are the varieties within the pose of variations, and you can choose. You can choose the option that's best for you. And knowing that we're all different shapes, our bodies have different range of motion, genetics playing a part of it.
Absolutely.
And sometimes we need to use a chair or a block or a strap. And this person may not need to use that because their range of motion, their body doesn't need that. So that's what I mean by accessible.
Kind of someone in a wheelchair do it in if they can't get out of a wheelchair into a chair?
Yes. So our chair classes, Megan teaches them in a way. So she's a chair yoga teacher right now, predominantly, and she teaches it in a way that there are standing options. But if you can't do the standing option, so usually the first in a chair yoga class, usually the first, I would say, half hour is seated, maybe even longer. It depends on the group. Yep. And then usually around, it could be 10, 15, 20 minutes. It just depends of the standing option with the holding of the chair. Always holding the chair options.
Okay.
But if the student cannot get out of the chair, then they can, Megan or the teacher who's teaching it will give them options. And then it's kind of like an evolution. Like as you practice, you get used to, like, that student would begin to realize, okay, well, when they're doing this thing, I am doing this thing. So then that's another thing that we encourage, is for them to kind of learn to understand, okay, this is what works for my body, regardless of how my ability, this is what's working for me, and this is what I'm going to do instead.
Perfect. Okay.
So yeah, that goes into the inclusivity, right, of, like, the body, it's an age is like, it's, there's a bit of, people think they're too old to do yoga, or they're in a wheelchair, or they can't get on the floor, right?
Yeah. Or they can get on the floor like me, and I can't get back up.
Yeah, you can't get up. So you can use a chair to get up.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
And we're just really, and just like, I remember reading a note from a student who was with us when she started, and she was afraid to be in the back. She didn't want to be in the front of the studio because of her body size. Mm-hmm. And she gave us a note after. I can almost cry when I read it, when I recite it, because it's so glued in my mind. She's like, at first I was intimidated to be in the front, but now I feel at home in the front, and I'm empowered to be in my body. So, like, it's just like,
that means you're doing the right thing.
Yeah, and we're not there. And yoga is not about fixing someone. Yeah, it's like, we're not here to. This is about unveiling yourself, to arrive in your body, to appreciate your body. And so we have all shapes and sizes and ages, and we have males, females, it's like, it's we try very hard to make it inclusive.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, you can go ahead.
Have you met anybody who can't do yoga?
I have had a student. I've had one experience with a student who was in a lot of pain. Even just sitting in the chair, she found it difficult to sit. And she was at a point where I feel like she needed some other, I think she needed some other guidance in terms of like meditation.
Sure, absolutely.
And even like for some people, like to draw their attention inwards to their body when they're in pain can be hard.
Sure,
right?
Absolutely.
So for her, I actually sent her home with some recorded audios, and she did a lot of her practicing just in her recliner at home.
Yeah.
And she found some meditations and stuff that she found helpful. That was my one experience that I personally had. I've had people who said they just didn't want to do yoga, like not because they couldn't, right?
Yeah.
And to each their own, right?
Well, that's right. Everything is not for everybody. So
yes, and when you're dealing with someone who is in an excruciating amount of pain and pain management, like they require a lot of more one-on-one support, and it's that needs to be addressed appropriately for sure.
So I guess then the other part is, you see people having New Year's resolutions and going to the gym, and after a couple of weeks or a month, they're not used to it and they just give up. So the sustainability part of your yoga is what's really important, is for people to come and continue and stay on the path, isn't it?
Yes. So sustaining a practice in a short time frame through commitment, right? And then having options that allow you to sustain it for a lifetime. Like, I'm not going to be doing the same yoga now that when I'm 80. Hopefully, if I'm lucky enough to get that, get there, right?
Yeah.
So, that's like that full spectrum, like lifetime of offering of yoga that we offer at the studio. But, within shorter time frames of like commitment of being able to show up consistently for your practice week to week is very important. And that's another important part of how we run the studio, is that it is set up in a way that it's in we do it in sessions, so seasonally. So we usually do a fall, winter, spring, summer session. And there's usually it varies on the session, but there's for example, the winter session is 12 weeks. And then the student commits to those 12 weeks with the teacher. So we are structured to go ahead.
How many sessions a week? 12 weeks?
So we have it set up where they can do 1, 2, or 3 classes a week.
Okay.
And then with the 3 classes a week, there is like an unlimited drop-in option. So that's someone who wants to come to yoga a lot.
Sure.
Most of our students are 1 to 2 times a week.
Okay.
And so that's how we have it set up. So it's something, and all of our students, like I think like 99% of our students choose that option. We do have what you'll see at many other studios is that we do have like a drop-in option or a pass option. But it's like it's not used by most people because they just feel they see how the results. They don't necessarily see it from a physical. They feel the results.
You're absolutely right, and that's
that
right.
Commitment.
Absolutely.
And it's really important. Like, the tradition of yoga is built on this student-teacher relationship. Like, that's how the lineage of yoga was passed down, was from teacher to student. And we just feel like to be able to dig that well, right? To be able to really tap into yourself is to really have that relationship with the teacher, and to be able to be in that community every week, showing up for each other. So the students are there, to be able to support each other. And then from a teacher standpoint, we're able to offer classes or design our classes around those students.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
So that's how we work on the commitment part. And then we still, like, if someone misses the class, there's an agreement between the teachers, like, oh, such and such missed class on Monday nights, they can come to another teacher's class. Sure. So they're not out, they don't feel like they're missing out on anything. So there's the flexibility there, but there's this expectation that we keep showing up for the same class as best we can.
Because obviously, I guess, you don't have an unlimited size studio. You want to make sure that it's maximized fully so that you get attendance all the time, right?
Yeah. And so even just from a business standpoint, it takes the pressure off us as teachers.
Right.
Like, we got into yoga to reduce the pressure in our lives.
Exactly.
And we don't want to get caught up in this whole transactional part of our relationship with the students. We want this to be transformational, right?
Yeah,
we want it to be something that we can focus our time and energy on there. And then if we're like, at this studio, we don't even have a front desk. Like, we're totally old school. Yeah. We take attendance with like pen and paper.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Hey, that's what we're used to.
And it's just like, we have a laptop now only because of the pandemic, because we had to go online.
Yeah.
So everything is done online before the student even enters the building, and then we got rid of the cash. Like, people used to bring cash sometimes before, and we even got rid of that with the pandemic, right? Yeah. So I still have people sending me checks in the mail, which is so cute. I love it. I love getting checks in the mail.
Oh, hey, yeah. So Nicole, yoga is about movement, and I've interviewed some people about Tai Chi. Sheila Leonard talked about that. I interviewed Elaine Dunphy about Nia dance. So how is the movement of yoga, is it unique to yoga, or does it combine other? So just speak about the movement itself, because like you said before, I look at yoga and I'd say I can never do that, and it can certainly turn people
Yes,
off because they
I
figure,
know.
well, I can't bend backwards like that. So just talk about the movement and how you incorporate that.
Yeah. So I can't really speak to other like modalities of movement like Tai Chi and Nia moves. I think I know a bit about it, but
Yeah.
and I think the intention for those practices is very similar to yoga.
Yes, absolutely.
That's what makes these types of modalities different from, lifting weights
Yes.
or,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
doing physical exercise,
Yeah.
is that there is an inner attitude how we present ourselves for the practice. And the practice itself also helps you cultivate that inner attitude. So it's like, it's from both ways. It's how you approach your practice, but also that it helps you cultivate that level of inner awareness. And for for yoga, unfortunately, for just how it's happened is that it's very commercialized, commodified. There's a billion-dollar industry. You have clothing and
Yeah. Yeah.
tight pants and crop tops, and
Yeah.
it's just like, it's unfortunate that that's what's the predominant image of a practice that at its roots is about just that you are enough as you are, and you are
Right.
whole and complete as you are. That's what it's all about, right?
Yeah.
It's not about looking good in your crop top or in your yoga pants. It's about, and the thing is, it's like it's really, how are you supposed to market something without images, right?
Yeah.
So, for me to say those things, it's easy for me to say it, but like, how do you advertise something
Yeah.
without having an image? So this is why the images are like out there in the world, right? This is
Yeah.
why, and the shapes of yoga are beautiful.
Yeah.
The shapes are beautiful. To see the body in those shapes,
Yeah.
it's very pleasing to the eye. So then when we feel like we can't do those shapes, we feel like
Right.
there's something wrong with us and that we can't do yoga, which is like,
Absolutely.
okay, well, that's not serving anybody.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I think it's just for us as teachers, as practitioners, it's another important thing for us to know that people who teach yoga, oftentimes, not all the time, but many of them have more ability sometimes to
Sure.
do certain shapes, right? And we could be doing these shapes. We can doing fancy arm stands, arm balances, and like standing on our head. But like, there's a balance there. Is like, is what is yoga and what is gymnastics, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So, so and I think it's important, and it's nothing wrong with that. But I think when we're presenting our classes, we have to include the part of yoga, which is what yoga is all about. And if we are teaching things that are more of this gymnastics approach, it's not about getting in that pose at all. That means nothing.
Yeah. Right. Right.
Right? And then when we're trying to like share what we're doing, it's about, I don't really feel like we should be presenting ourselves in those types of postures.
Mm-hmm.
So really, like my personal practice now, I'm literally like lying on the floor for an hour. Like I barely move.
Yeah.
It's very quiet. I do teach a more active class now, but it's not part of my personal practice because I'm in a stage in my life right now where I have a 4-year-old. I'm running a business in a pandemic. I'm tired.
Right.
I don't have energy to do handstands at the wall.
Right.
And but I do have energy to teach a class, and I have the ability to teach a class. If someone wants something in that level, then we can definitely offer it.
Sure.
But this is kind of my mission to like kind of to make people more aware that that yoga isn't doing those big deep poses. One of my a very common thing to know in yoga is people will talk about is having sthira, which is steadiness, and sukha, which is sweetness. So having that within a pose is what we want. So what can you do to be steady and sweet, right?
Right.
With yourself. What
Right.
is that? Is it
Right.
lying on the floor and doing Shavasana for 20 minutes?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah. Nicole, many of your students commit to a session of weekly classes, and I know you said you've got like a 12-week session. What's the importance of that commitment?
So the importance is that again, it's not a quick fix, and it's not even about a fix, right? We live in a world where we go somewhere and we want someone to like give us a thing right away. Like, this, give me the thing that helps me fix this thing right away.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I like to look at it this way. How many years did it take for your body to get to where it is right now with this say, for example, the shoulder pain? How many years?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So why would we think that it's going to take a week or for it to be better? You know what I mean? And I really feel like we need to be able to carve out that time for ourselves. It's a ritual. It's a part of our lives. And that's what yoga truly is really living your life through yoga. And there will be times that you cannot practice physically. When I was at the later stages of pregnancy, or when my daughter was first born, especially that first year, I was literally breastfeeding her and like breathing. That was my meditation.
Yeah.
That was my yoga, right? So, but it's through that routine, developing that skill of being able to commit, to hold yourself accountable, so that you can really reap the benefits of the practice, right?
The research, and we've heard terms of it takes 21 days to change a habit.
Mm-hmm.
And that came about in the 50s or 60s. There was a surgeon who would, a cosmetic surgeon who used to amputate legs. And he said that it takes a minimum of 21 days for a person to lose phantom pain. If they had to have their leg amputated, they still had pain. They still felt the pain, which they called phantom pain. So he said it took a minimum of 21 days. And then people got on the bandwagon of saying, well, it takes 21 days to change a habit. But the truth of the matter is, he said it took a minimum of 21 days. There was someone did some research. They followed 70 people for an extended period of time. And the research, and this is the bad news, I'll give you the good news later. The bad news is it takes anywhere from 66 days to 284 days to change a habit.
Oh yeah, totally.
Right. So, but the good news is the researchers are saying that you don't have to be on point, perfect all the time to change. What you do is what you're saying is you embrace the journey. That's what you do. You get comfortable with the journey. So just because you don't feel comfortable, you start taking yoga and you don't feel comfortable in 21 days, then you say, well, I guess I'm never going to be comfortable, because if I'm not comfortable in 21 days, then I'll never get comfortable. But that's not what the research shows. The research shows that you embrace the journey. If you fall off the wagon and you miss a few classes, that has no impact on what the final outcome is going to be.
No, yeah. And it's that all or nothing approach that unfortunately is just our predominant way of living, is on all or nothing. And it's not about all or nothing. It's about doing the best you can. And even within your practice, it doesn't have to be all or nothing. It shouldn't be all or nothing. Within your practice, you have to meet yourself with compassion, with nurturance, to be nourished. Right. We're living in a society where we're burning a candle from both ends. We shouldn't be doing that in our yoga. It should be a practice where you're cultivating that nourishment, where you're able to be kind to yourself. Right. And then that's when the powerful things happen, because in those moments when you break your leg or you're 41 weeks pregnant, right? Yeah. You have that tool inside you, all that work that you have cultivated and worked on for weeks and months. Be like, I know my physical body is not able to do what I want it to do right now, but I have this inner quality within me that knows that I'm strong and I'm powerful, and that after I get through this point, that my body will be there for me to continue. So it's just a way to live, right?
Yeah. Nicole, we're almost out of time. Thank you for taking the time to talk to us. Can you leave our listeners with something that they can use right now, to particularly coming out of this pandemic and, the fear of the unknown and things? What simple advice could you give that someone could use right today to help with this?
So one of my teachers say this, and one of her teachers tells this to her, and it's so simple. And she says, start in an easy way and it will take you all the way. And I know it sounds very simple, but you can apply that to your yoga. You can apply that to how we start living our lives. But it's just, we have to be gentle. We have to be kind. Like when I'm being hard on myself in terms of like, oh, the expectation now is for me to go out into the world and do all the things now because the world is open.
Yeah.
But like just talk to yourself like you would your best friend. And I'm like imagine you're holding yourself like you would a newborn baby, and be like, be kind to yourself. Start easy. How does that look for you in terms of how you're going back into the world? Maybe it's like, okay, I'm going to go see my best friend who I haven't seen in like, a year for tea, and there's no expectations. If anyone is putting expectations on you, well, that's their thing. That's not you, right? And for practitioners of yoga, I would really like them to be able to reflect on their intentions of their practice as well, and even if you're starting a yoga practice, is like, why the intention of a practice right now, I feel you should be practicing in a way that calms your nervous system, that cultivates that sweetness that you have inside. And I really feel like we need to be gentle with ourselves. And yeah, I hope that helps.
Oh, it does. And when you talk about that, it reminds me of a quote I read some time ago, and I thought it was so powerful. And the quote said, treat yourself the same way you treat someone you love, because you're already complete.
Exactly.
Nicole, thanks very much. It's great. I always feel like I get a therapy session every time I talk to wonderful people like yourself. Again, thanks very much for taking the time to talk to us today.
You're welcome. It's my pleasure.